All right. Well, Egypt is a land that's famous for being unique in the world as a collection of the most beautiful and the most mysterious things in the world. And I would have to say, in all of Egypt, the most beautiful and the most mysterious thing is our guest that we'll be speaking with tonight. Sohaila Hussein is John Anthony West's, I don't want to say Girl Friday, I don't want to say right-hand man, but Sohaila is present in all of John West's tours. And it's one of the special things about going with John that Sohaila is an Egyptian. She spent her life there and really has a unique insight into the ruins and into the mystery and into this whole conversation about all of the things that we're missing about ancient Egypt that we weren't told about from traditional Egyptology. One of the first things we're going to talk about is the name Egypt itself and one of the difficulties of translating actual Egyptian into later Greco-Roman and the English language that we speak in. So Sohaila, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, James. I'm very happy to see you all.
So tell me about Egypt. We'd spoke at some point about the 5 names of Egypt. Let's start with that.
Well, the ancient Egyptians, they really loved Egypt so much. To them, they thought that after life, when they make it to the paradise, they will come back to Egypt. Egypt is the paradise for them. Also, they cared so much that once they are dead, they are buried in Egypt. Those that get buried outside Egypt, they're lost. There is no afterlife. It's no good. So Egypt is the sacred land to them, and they loved it so much. It's magical, truly magical. Until now, with all the controversies and the modern life, but imagine, just shut your eyes or be in the river, float, and on the river Nile in the right way, and you will see what the Egyptians saw in Egypt at night. The stars, the sky is so clear. The river goes like, it flows beautiful. The sides lush and green. The desert sometimes comes right in the water. It's the marriage between the green, Horus, desert, death, together. It's a parallel, 2 forces that the Egyptians believed in them. And they never, it was a harmony of forces, negative and positive went together, parallel. Anyway, so the Egyptians loved Egypt in many ways, and they thought the Nile is a mirror to the Milky Way. Egypt is mirroring the sky, and they had great knowledge, amazing understanding and detail with the constellations, with the stars, and they actually mimicked all what was happening up there on the ground in Egypt. This we may talk about later on, because the talk about Egypt can be on and on and on. But everything the Egyptian did was reconciliating, not just that, respecting the nature, the sky, the earth, the unity. It's a whole unit, and they were at peace with it. The Egyptians then called Egypt Kemet. And Kemet, referring, this is the black land, Kemet. Black because of the silt that is laid on the ground, on earth, after the floods that took place 3 months, June, July, and August is the height of the floods of the river. The river is upside down. It starts down there in Ethiopia and flows. It's the biggest river, I think, that goes from south to north. So it brings all the richness. This made Egypt fertile and beautiful. And yearly, it had been kind of like regaining the youth and nutrition of the land, the black land, the rich land. I think Kemet, it's believed that Kemet is the origin of chemistry, chemistry and magic is somehow connected to that. Magic to ancient Egyptians, it was the art and the knowledge of transformation, transforming sand to gold, in an extremity, but transformation, chemistry, chemet. It's one of the names, and I know that you are so interested in the subject of magic. We can also talk about it in length somehow, but I dug into a few names of that the Egyptians in ancient days called Egypt. One of them, I will say the name in hieroglyphic, the ancient language. It's the sacred language, and thanks to Champollion, he was able to decipher it from the Rosetta Stone that is now in the British Museum. And there are 3 languages written on it: hieroglyphic, the sacred language; demotic, John called it laundry list kind of language, the people, the fast language; and Ptolemaic or Greek. And the name, cartouche name of the king up there, the king has his name in the cartridge style, that is only royal for king and queen. His name and her name were written down below, so he cracked the language. And since then, of course, there was a great hunger to search and to learn about Egyptian science, and that was the beginning of what is called Egyptology, that officially started in 1880 from Champollion time and onwards. There are great scholars that carried on this science. Before it, Egypt was known or the Egyptian, actually tomb robbers, tomb robbery was the key to finding relics and trophies, and it was very active in the late 1700s and beginning of 1800s and onwards. Can't tell you that it stopped now, maybe harder, but still going on, and we always see some unofficial smuggled pieces from Egypt here and there around the world. Anyway, so the language, the Egyptian language, the ancient one, hieroglyphic, they have sounds that agree with the Arabic voice and not necessarily agree with Latin, language. For instance, one of the names of Egypt by the Egyptians, they called Egypt Anet. Anet in Egyptian is called El Bahia. And I have no idea how to explain this wonderful description of Egypt. Bahia. Bahia is the girl that is like sunshine when you see her, that has all the glow and beauty in her. So that's one of the names. Also, they called Egypt Nufret. And I think many girls were also called Nufret, and until now, many girls are called Nufret. Nufret means the unique one, the complete made one, the beauty, the beautiful one. That's Nufret. Nobody can forget the beautiful statue of Nufret, and I thought you wanted to say that, and Rahatip of the Old Kingdom, 4th dynasty in the museum. Wonderful couple. Also, they called Egypt Bucket, and it's like she's glorious like a jewel. It's the jewel. Also, they called her Ta Miri. Ta means land. Miri, the beloved land. Huh? Also, they called Egypt Meshir. And that means the enclosed one with enclosed one, protected, being in a castle style, walled up, and from which the name this measure came from the name Midger, and that means you know why? That's a very interesting one, because Egypt was surrounded by the deserts, and that was a great fortification and protection against all raids since the very beginning of time until most known Middle Kingdom raid against Egypt by the Hyksos. So the huge deserts around Egypt have been enough boundary and protection and like fortification for the protected land, which is the two great lands, the strips on both sides of the running river Nile, you see? So it was the enclosed one, the protected one. And this was very much used in ancient Egypt. In the 14th century, the name Midger and Mishir was used by Akkadian, Ashurian, Babylon, Phoenician, and Old Arabic and Hebrew too. Also, they called Misri, Mishri, Misr, Misram, Masraim. And this is all, the source of this is from the book of the great Professor Dr. Abdul Halim Nuruddin. Also, they called the Egypt Wijat. Wijat means the complete one that has no minimal. There is nothing that accomplished totally, a total thing. Egypt was to them the most complete, the one that has nothing reduces. It's not reduced. It has it all. So that's how I wanted to start my talk with everyone, to tell how Egypt was in the eyes of ancients, and actually it is in our eyes too, mostly. Still will be forever.
Beautiful, Sohaila. When you say that it was complete, one of the things that John West, in fact, one of the things that I first read that caught my attention about Egypt long years before I met John West, I'd read an article that he'd written, and there's something that normal Egyptology doesn't acknowledge, that Egypt, as you'd said, as that legend just said, that it was complete, it was finished, it was all the way developed. There's no intermediate period where Egypt was learning to build pyramids or learning to write in hieroglyphs. It seems like it was completed even in the very first dynasty, and certainly there might be no place on earth that you can see evidence of technology that is so sophisticated medicine, sophisticated archaeology, sophisticated culture. And as John said, it was a pinnacle of development, and it always was. It seemed like it started from a perfect place. And if anything, over time, certainly after the Roman occupation, Egypt started going downhill. But a very interesting thing about how complete it was. I want to bring something else up. If I said everything good about Sohaila at the beginning of the interview, we wouldn't have had time to hear her talk. But there's one more, well, another amazing thing about her is Sohaila is a famous Egyptian actress. And so if she looks familiar to you, it's because you might have seen her in...
Very famous. I could have, if I concentrated. I didn't want to leave John talk alone. I had to be with him, and I had to compromise, be here and there. So I can't be taken totally from this.
Even more noble that she had to choose between a glamorous life as a film star. Venice has to give up things to take care of me. Venice has to be around me all the time because I hurt myself when I'm unsupervised. And so I certainly understand why you would take the time to follow John around. Sohaila is also interesting. Well, in a number of ways, she's a fascinating and landmark person. But Sohaila was the first woman to ever be granted a motorcycle operator's license. And there's a whole bunch of other things, but she is a remarkable figure from a number of directions. If you've seen old recreations of Egypt where there's a beautiful woman playing Isis or a pharaoh's wife or Queen Tai, you'll look around at all the old Egyptian documentaries where they do historic recreations, and you'll frequently, I every once in a while will see Sohaila in these shows, and it always tickles me. Now, you've been on the ground, you've been in Egypt your whole life, and you've been on the ground following John West for years and years and years, and people don't sometimes know that John travels a lot, and Sohaila was always there in his ear at each location, not telling him what to say, but reminding him what things to say at each location. And she was really the kind of unsung hero of the tours. So one of the things I've been wanting to talk to you about, it's just a really interesting conversation about Egypt. You're an Egyptologist. Could you talk for a minute about what was it about John West that was so problematic to Egyptologists? And just maybe talk about, what do Orthodox Egyptologists say about Egypt, and what did John say about Egypt that was so different than regular Egyptologists?
Gradually, I'll talk one by one. I graduated from the faculty that graduates wonderful Egyptologist guides, and it's very orthodox. And you have to actually learn the history, dynasty after dynasty, chronology, where this was found, the history. They have their own approach, or the general approach that you read everywhere. And it's a science, wonderful. And we cannot deny the grants that we are given by Egyptologists excavating. Those are the ones that have the credibility, academic credibility, in order to have permits to dig. And there are great findings until now. So now that is one part of it. When I started knowing John, I heard crazy things coming out of his mouth, and crazy things to me, as I have been educated in a completely different route. So things get mixed up here. And of course, until you realize the language, because he uses very hard language, some English native people don't even get to know those things. So it took me a while until I wrapped this. In the beginning, I would be challenging him in a nice way, friendly way. And it was always nice in the trip to have a pinch of my difference. It even cleared the view more, and it was fun as well. But with time, I realized that with logic and evidence, John has a wonderful, profound idea of what was going on really, certainly in many places. Like John also uses the classical Egyptology in many ways, because we put the temples, date, year, dynasty, king, and stuff. But why? What's behind the scene? Is it only a carving on the wall, a king being crowned, a king killing his enemies? Is that all? It's so dry a story, yeah? But with John saying it through the symbolic view, approach, symbolist Egypt comes so making sense in many ways. Are you asking me why did they hate John and were after him? Yeah. Academics are too as well, because lately we started to see academic professors that like to listen to John and can contain and agree, even without saying they agree to him, but they welcome his approach silently. Others, they take it personally, like you are running after them, you are killing them. They are so rigid, so rigid. They don't want to think of it, listen. Maybe it's right. John provoked many of them because I think when trying to predate the Sphinx to earlier than 10,000 or 20 or 30,000 years before their date, and when honestly he made the mystery of the Sphinx, and they actually measured, they had Placido Domingo, he did thorough measurement. They assumed the face could have been this or that. One of those, and I have to confess this publicly now, before seeing John, in my Orthodox education, I always felt that the jaw of the Sphinx does not match the same head of Catherine in the museum. Catherine's face is mostly like, look at my face, rounded, high cheeks, jaw, normal Egyptian. The jaw of the Sphinx, go ahead now, we see it. It protrudes like this, and the face does not match it. So I always felt there's something wrong here. How could this be? Because, you know, it doesn't match. Anyway, when John said it, when he proved it, yes, it could have been dated by or made by earlier people who resided in this land and moved in here and became Egyptians. So what's the origin of Egyptians? Where did they come from originally? I just read a research, I think we talked about it, about the origin of man, of from where Egyptians came. And this is being spread all over the world now, that it seems that there were waves of immigrants from Ethiopia after the catastrophic thing when Ice Age, in the end of Ice Age, there have been a world catastrophe that changed the whole world geography and topography. So from Ethiopia, there have been many immigrations that took north. Many of them came to Egypt, then fled to Asia, not the other way around as it had been said before and thought before, and many of them went to Europe. Now, studying the DNA and race of man on Earth, they found that the Egyptian DNA is so close, the closest to the Europe race. It's been a study. We can write down the names of the doctors. It's in, I think, in England. Is it Oxford or I'm not sure. I will have to write you down the details. So anyway, what's wrong if the Egyptians came from somewhere else, resided here, became Egyptians, and they built this 30 years ago, 40 years, 20,000 years ago, whatever it is. Like, I think they think he's robbing the Egyptian making and giving credit to this great thing to others, while he's doing, I think, the opposite. He's giving Egypt the antique and many years to be before anyone else. When Egypt was doing this great monument and others like Osirian and others, sorry, in Europe, they were running after sheep, and in here and there, they were just doing whatever. Yeah, it was very advanced. They have went here, became so very advanced, and did what they did. So when John proved his theory of predating the Sphinx to this time, he really have been helped by amazing geologists, great Robert Shaw, Robert Bouval, astronomer, and Graham Hancock. They were really the Musketeers. This team has come with amazing science and study, and it shouldn't be shaded. It should be checked and studied and thought of, and I believe it. You know.
Well said. I know it's a sad that John died when he did, because they say that science progresses one death at a time. I love that saying. It's so morbid, but it's so true that old academics need to die, and the young academics that come up after them are much more open to ideas. And so just in the last 5 or 6 years, there's a Russian encyclopedia, the absolute standard orthodox encyclopedia of scientific knowledge, acknowledges John West's Sphinx theory as a viable alternative to Orthodox Egyptology. And just like you'd said, this absolute wall of denial from the old generation of Egyptologists is starting to give way, and there's this new generation of Egyptologists that don't have a problem with John, because it's not such a territorial, affront or an assault to their reputation. And so I found that too, that I fall into the habit that John used to have of saying all Egyptologists and all academics. And, he had kind of a persecution complex, rightfully so. He was quite persecuted. But I found it very encouraging that the new generation of Egyptologists and academics are acknowledging his stuff. Speaking of how old Egypt is, and speaking of the fantastic John West tour, one of the things that impressed me on the tour was, from the very first dynasty, from the oldest things we know about Egypt, the ruins that we find in a lot of cases are built over the top of things that were already incredibly old in the very first dynasty of Egypt. So next to the Sphinx, well, the Sphinx itself, of course, but next to the Sphinx, there's this temple called the Valley Temple, that there's places where the stone's fallen away and you can see that it was built over the top of something incredibly old. We have Abydos and the Osirion. The Osirion looks more like Stonehenge than anything else in Egypt. And anyway, all over Egypt, there appears to be evidence that dynastic Egypt was built over the top of something that was vastly, vastly older. And here's what I'm getting to. There's a place in Abydos where there's a wall on which is carved the king's lists, the hieroglyphs of king's lists. And there's a point from the king's lists forward where Orthodox Egyptology point to that and say, well, here's a record from King Menes, or, the Scorpion King Narmer at the beginning, all the way through, and not only the names of the pharaohs, but the lengths of their reign, how long they were the pharaoh. And so from this certain point to the right, we see, the beginning of Egypt, and then all of the pharaohs that came after. But what Orthodox Egyptologists don't talk about is, from that point to the left, they also include pharaohs of Egypt. But the farther this way you go, the more bizarre it gets, because the reigns of the pharaohs and the lifetimes get longer and longer, so that not too far back, there's pharaohs that were reigning for 200 and 300 years. There's pharaohs that reigned for, I forget what the longest one is. It's something insane, like 1,200 years or something. And so they tell you all by themselves, it's not a secret that there was an incredibly long past stretching into areas that, I don't know any humans nowadays that live that long. So it makes you wonder, were they humans? Were there conditions on Earth that were different that allow people to live longer? Was there something about ancient Egyptian technology that allowed you to live longer? What do you think about that, about the King's List and the age of the previous pharaohs?
Well, Chance, I read hieroglyphic. One of the things that we learned, and maybe I'm rusted now. I need to go back and study more and refresh my memory. But I have to tell you that the king list started from Menes and ending one after one king until Ramses, because Ramses, he's the one who did this list in Abydos. They moved Akhenaten, Hatshepsut, King Tutankhamun from it because they were not thought of as worthy of being included. I can't tell you that I really know about what you're talking about those earlier, are they earlier kings to Menes, you mean?
Yeah.
And they lived this?
Yeah.
I haven't I haven't encountered, I haven't come across this before. I have to see and get back to it to learn about it. And it's never been mentioned to me. I'm not sure where did you get this information. I know that facing the king list, there are many engraved names, and they say hundreds of minor deities names in there. So I never cared so much to have a whole day deciphering which after which name into the facing name, facing part. But I'm not sure I got across this incident. However, the kings, the ancients, before the sophisticated mummification, they had pit in the ground, and later on they did like a basket or kind of like bordered it with some wooden boards, and placed the deceased facing west, which is the death of the sun, the west completion land. And many of those just put in the pit simply have survived because of the dry sand. With the sophisticated mummification process, and it became elaborate more and more with time, we found most of the mummies actually in perfect condition. And now recently they are examining and x-raying them, and they're finding amazing things inside them, and how they really fixed some broken bones in them. I wanted to tell you about that in one point. But anyway, the lifespan of Egyptians was normal, like what, 45, 50. Some kings lived longer, like Ramses II. He's the one who's known to live almost 100 years, had many marriages, many more kids and stuff. But I'm sorry, I haven't been into that detail you just said.
Not a problem. Also at the Abydos Temple, there's this really there's a really interesting thing at the back of Abydos, like a secret passageway. There's a tiny little stone in the floor. And if you pick that stone up, there's a little passage you can walk down into this really cramped, tiny little room that seems like it's a good place for hiding, or it's a good place for hiding things. I'm going to share something here on my desktop. In this little room at the back of Abydos Temple is one of the weirdest hieroglyphs that people talk so much about. A lot of insane people and a lot of really interesting, credible people, because you can read the hieroglyphs. And I know we've talked about this. I'm going to share this this document.
But that's not in Abydos.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dendera. You're right. You told me that already.
Dendera. Yeah. Okay. Now, this is in the crypt, and actually, most of the temples of Egypt have crypts. And even passages behind the thick walls, that if you move the right piece of wall, you find passages and passages behind. The temples were so full of secrets. Anyway, the most beautiful engravings and detail and carvings of Dendera now, because it's the now Dendera, which is only 2,000 years old since the Roman time and a little bit of Greek time. Greek and Roman time is when the Ptolemies ruled Egypt, of Greek origin, and when the Romans sent Perfect to rule Egypt for Rome. But the temples are made by the Egyptian hands into their time, which wasn't the perfect made as detail, but wonderful, great constructions. Anyway, the best of the detail quality is in the crypt, and this is one of them. I see here the very famous, talked about now recently much more than ever, this standing erectly, beautifully straight back baboon body with a frog head and two knives. Then the most famous eggplant with the serpent in it, that everyone is saying this was the lamb. Personally, I don't want to make big explosions against me, but I, Sohaila, believe that the Egyptians were able to conduct kind of energy for illumination. And that's not the only incident. There is one more that I love to talk about when I take our groups. We talk always, John and I, we talk about it in Edfu. Anyway, the writing on top, Nebu, it's gold. It's something, they're calling this, relating this to gold, golding PAI, or I can't see it very much. Anyway, so you're asking about this figure, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, there have been many studies recently about it, and it's related to the knowledge and the very advanced knowledge of medicine in ancient Egypt, because the frog Heket, it is the symbol of the number 100,000. So it's believed that this figure is referring to the beginning of when man wisdom, when became wise, not before man, like when man has the collective knowledge and became wise 100,000 years ago. The baboon is the knowledge and the wisdom. The frog is the years, 100,000. And when erect like this, when man started to walk like this, the glitz, is it called glitz? That folds behind that.
Epiglottis.
What is it called?
Glottis or epiglottis?
Yeah, it falls when you are standing this way. So it fell right where it should be. So the air fills your mouth and nose right. And then that's why and how man was allowed to speak. Animals don't speak. Fish have, what do you call them? Glits? What do you call them?
Gills.
Gills. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Gills. Animals have something else. The nose, the air system go to the man according to this posture. And what is that part again?
Glottis.
Glottis. In a way to make man speak. That's the beginning of how the awareness and complete conscious man is referred to this incident for 100,000 years ago. Anyway, this is symbolically. And this is another study. And it has evidence and proof. I can also write down the doctors and the professors who dug for this research. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of medicine, there's I believe it's called the Edwin Smith papyrus that details really sophisticated.
Who said? Sorry, so who said? I didn't get that. Who said what?
Sweetie, can I have a copy? Sorry, Sohaila. Just 1 second here. Let me get rid of this screen. There's a.
You want to see this, or shall we get back to full screen?
Okay, let's just 1 second here. Stop sharing. There we go. Sorry about that. So there's a papyrus, the Edwin Smith papyrus, and there's a number of others, but the Edwin Smith papyrus, if I'm saying that right, details surgeries, very sophisticated surgeries, including brain surgeries, that they seem to know what parts of the brain corresponded to what parts of the body. And there's even skulls that had neat little squares cut in them that indicate pretty sophisticated brain surgery.
If we talk about medicine, it will take days and days. I just read, I know they were great in brain surgery, fixing teeth, handling and treating cancer cases. This is all written in many references. But the very recent one I read last week, I wanted to send you that. They were x-raying a mummy and they discovered that it had a bone surgery and this big of a nail to help healing the fractured bone. And it was ratting. The very latest wrapping in order to have a successful operation, and it was found. The detail is amazing. I have the picture. I wish I can show you that. I will gladly send you a few things if you want to publish them after our talk. The Egyptians were amazing in the science of medicine and pharmaceutical science. And when we go, for instance, to Komombo, which is so related to medicine and healing, and this is a unique temple that it's not complete and mostly in ruin, and not the greatest art of all, and I love it. And John loved it because it has such a location over the curb of the river, overlooking the whole area. I mean, such a beauty, and it's good to see the downfall of art and how. Hello, V, love you. He left. So anyway, half of it is healing. Horus, that is meant to be the doctor in medicine. The other half is death. Those who don't make it, they go. So crocodile and falcon together, sandwiched in unity, not, separated. The sophisticated understanding of the Egyptians of the two lines, forces, negative, positive, black and white, together, it made sense. These people knew the essence of how creation is working. That's how, when they did temples, you go to the temple in the right time, with the right people, because you are radiating to each other. I mean, this is magic that, you don't just go to a temple and it's a zoo. I'm sorry. Nice. Hello, pictures, and go. No. Temples have the respect. You are prepared to come and receive this. Anyway, so you go to the temple. All right, let's talk about Komombo. In many walls, there are drawings and reliefs how pharmacy was reached, symbols of pharmacy, and in the back there are the tools of operation, and Isis, the lady, she's on a birth stool giving birth, and that is the healthier way. And I heard that in America they came back to using the birth stool once more, and you see the eye of Horus, right? There are two eyes of Horus, left and right. One is the moon, one is the sun. The eye of Horus on that wall. 1 minute. I have to draw you this. This is amazing. Just a second. Here is the brow. Forgive my bad. Here, can you see this?
Raise it up. Raise it up a little bit. There, good. Yep.
Can you?
Yep.
Okay. With time, time goes. This became this.
Move it to your left a little bit. And pull it back a little tiny bit. And mount a little more to your left. To your left. Other left. Camera right. So yeah, that is the birthplace of the RX, the prescription logo that doctors to this day and pharmaceutical people.
You see it now?
Yeah.
That's the origin of RX in every prescription written. So anyway, the Egyptians, they knew the blood circulation, they knew treating this and that, and they were perfect in it. And there is amazing. They are amazing, aren't they?
The birth thing that you're talking about was really interesting. The Native Americans and I think in Asia too, rather than laying down and delivering a baby on your back, in Egypt, there's this fantastic depiction of a woman sitting upright and the midwife or whatever underneath. But interesting because it's a different posture, and it turns out that it's a lot more medically sound. Plus, on that same wall, there's just amazing variety of tools and medical equipment that very sophisticated. I mean, very sophisticated tools.
Yeah, still used. And into this eye, you see the eye of Horus, huh? Also is the beginning of fractions in mathematics. So it's medicine, like 1/8 and 1/10. It's how the fractions of the eye is as well. Medicine, it's the day, it's the night. When the eye was torn by Set in one of their famous battles, it fell on the ground and it was fractioned to many, many pieces. So they collected it together. It became a whole, one piece, a whole gathered together. You know, myth has helped, or it was woven into, there is a weaving of myth and deity, Nitro, into, and I think it's not too far away from real life. Maybe those were the Neterus that were walking, stepping on earth before man was. You know what I mean? And this was tradition, memory that has been passed by man after man. Who is Osiris really? Was he a mythical only? Is he?
Well said. There's another site that I wanted to ask you about, and it turns out it's something that you've had some experience with. There's a place called Zawiet. Let me just try and
Zawiet
exactly. So let's see here.
It's off limits.
You literally can't go there. Can you see these pictures? Let me see.
Okay.
If I'm doing this right. Oh, there we go. Okay, let's see. Sorry, just 1 second. I'm doing this wrong. So there's a place called what's the, yeah, so it's a ruin. I'm going to find some pictures here in a minute and put it up, but it is an amazing thing. It's somewhat like the let's try that.
Yeah.
A massive ruin. Here are some better pictures. This place is absolutely gigantic, and it has some very strange features. This curved space here was actually covered. It looks very mechanical. At first, people thought this was a tomb of some kind. Let me see if I can find another picture.
Amazing. This one is amazing.
Giant, absolutely giant. And it was one of those things that was such a troublemaking thing that Egyptologists don't know what to say about it. And you can't go see it now. It seems like one of the most important ruins in Egypt, but it was used as a garbage dump. Like, it's all full of garbage now. And then it was re-annexed to a military property, so nobody can ever visit it. And there's a lot to learn here from this place. It is just absolutely the weirdest, most megalithic thing, but we'll never be able to study it because it's completely off limits. So tell me about your experience. You've been seeing this since you were a little girl, huh?
Well, I never liked never. Never say never.
Right.
Because Dahshur, the bent pyramid and the red pyramid, has been always also off limits since it's been a military base. But they opened it to tourists and they cleaned up the place. And that was for quite a few good years now, don't know, 10 years or more, when people start talking about Zawiyat al-Aryan, I'm not sure, I do not think that the government is hiding it intentionally. We have zillion of places, amazing areas, a lot and a lot and a lot. There is also a garbage problem because we have almost 100,000 people. Not all the people who live now have the great consciousness for tidy up. And there is a garbage problem, I think, worldwide. Even in America, I've seen footage of that. So because the place is neglected, and it's right next to a village, I bet. So they're just dumping things. I'm not sure this was intentionally to hide it. One day, and maybe soon, I hope, because there are more alert and intelligent heads in the government and in the Ministry of Tourism. Lady that is ministry now is amazing one, actually, very wonderful. I'm very proud of her presenting Egypt truly. And the antiquities department recently is managed by younger, wonderful, motivated people. So maybe we should talk to them. Maybe we should get their attention to clean up this and open it to visitors. This is the point. And we can do that together with the media, with the social pressure. They would do it. There is nothing to hide. How is it made? It's amazing. The cuts are so amazingly straight up, and it's the core, and this square oval shaped sarcophagus, is it? What else is it to be? Is amazing. Reminds me of the womb.
Wow. There was a weird liquid that was found in it. It had a weird residue.
It's oval like the womb. Is it like, if it was a burial, which it looks like it, if it may was, or if it may have been the sarcophagus for a burial, does it mean you're going back to the womb and then you get born again man? Or it isn't, maybe it was for a ritual of somehow. It seems to be funeral area, since it's in the desert in the west where Egyptians usually, mostly, did their necropolis tombs in the west where the sun goes. So it fits as a necropolis, looks like it. The making is amazing, and the Egyptians made great, amazing things. I think it's a very old, preceding even dynasties. It fits so much to the antique pots that John showed us in many places, whether the erosion of the Sphinx, whether the Osirian, whether also the amazing two bottom stories of the second pyramid. They are amazing. Huh? The size, color. You see, Egyptology or Egyptologists, they can date learning about the nature and the quality and the quarrying of a stone. So they really are way older than the rest of the pyramid. That's when you were talking about two civilizations or two different historical, dates on one place. So, like in the Red Pyramid, the inner room has this volcanic, megalithic look that's like from another planet, from another dimension. And it seems that the whole pyramid was made in order to enclose this amazing looking thing in there. Remember, Chance, that place?
It was really bizarre because this pyramid, well, just like you said, this pyramid is a beautiful pyramid, perfect geometry. And you go inside, and there's a room there that looks like an explosion took place. Or to me, just in my own mind, and maybe I've read too much science fiction, but it looks to me like this whole pyramid was there to trap something from coming out of the earth. That's not a very scientific description, but it's such a strange bit of architecture that they wouldn't have. It doesn't make sense that they would build a pyramid over this giant exploded hole in the ground. And the stones, very much like Pompeii, if you dig in Pompeii down below the Italian city, the stones get bigger the farther back you go. And there's some kind of cyclopean civilization that nobody's really acknowledging. That it seems the same thing happens in Egypt, that the farther down you go, the size of these stones are like frightening. They're almost frightening. I can't imagine, especially with what we're told about how the Egyptians only had copper chisels and those stone balls. I cannot imagine how they were building these things. And then the whole question about why were they? It sure seems like there was a kind of science in play that we're not acknowledging.
Anna, I love to believe, and I believe, that the ancient worlds were connected. What is the Eastern Island?
Oh, Easter Island, yeah.
Göbekli Tepe, recently, yeah.
Yep.
Mexico, in many places, Peru, yeah. There are hints and signs everywhere that makes me feel those people were connected and they were doing similar things. Maybe in close years, like not all the same years. One is more ancient than the other, but there was some kind of connection. I really love this, and I love to believe this. I even, in one of the movies of John, since you are in Australia, there was this amazingly etched, carved hieroglyphic wall in a slit in natural wall, two great mountains, very thin passage. You go in the desert, something remote, and I've seen those amazing hieroglyphics written, chiseled, just exquisitely right, like any of the advanced places here. What is that? Is that modern? Maybe someone went and did it. And how would he do this perfect kind of that we can't really do anywhere nowadays? Not like that.
That one in particular is really interesting because what Sohaila said is absolutely true. There's a place here called Gosford in Australia, and there's a place called this cave that has the Gosford glyphs. And not only are they fantastic hieroglyphs, and they tell this story, and the story is amazing. That's a whole other conversation. But the writing is proto-dynastic. It's before the first kingdom, and so there are very few Egyptologists that even know how to read it. So of course the obvious response was, oh, it's fake, it's all faked. But the more accomplished Egyptologists started looking at it, and there's some really remarkable linguists here as well, and they said this is actually old, before Old Kingdom Egypt, that it's incredibly old but accurate. They're accurate, and it tells the story of two Egyptian princes that came here and got shipwrecked, and they call Australia the accursed land, which I can certainly understand because Australia will kill you in 100 different ways before you even get off the shore. But it's a remarkable thing. In the Cairo Museum, there are boomerangs, and apparently in King Tut's mask, there's something that gold does. There's a radioisotope thing that you can do with gold where gold will tell you where it's from. It tells you where on earth it came from. And apparently there's some Australian gold in King Tut's mask. And opals only occur here in Australia. And I think Queen Tai, or one of King Tut's possessions, had some opal in it. So it's a very interesting connection. And if, like you'd said, Egypt was part of a worldwide culture, then it would be, you would absolutely understand that it came from a really long time ago. And the Aborigines here, for some reason, nobody pays attention to anything the Aborigines say here, but they'll all tell you if you just ask them. They all talk about, we remember a time when the Egyptians came here for gold and for magic. They talk about magic and magicians back then.
Tance, I'm just going to interrupt. We've done an hour.
All right.
Ellen has a question, and so I might jump in with that.
Hey, Ellen.
Ellen says, hi, Sohaila.
Hi, Vince. Vanessa, you are cracking, okay?
Oh,
The voice.
okay. Thank you, darling. I don't know what to do. But
but
Sohaila, she wants to know, can you talk about Sekhmet at Karnak?
Hi, Ellen. How are you, darling? Sekhmet. Aren't we all Sekhmets here? Huh? Me, you, Vanessa. Every one of us has a touch of Sekhmet and a touch of other ones together. Anyway, we didn't talk about Nutaruz in general, but Sekhmet is a feminine consciousness or principle. You can call them gods or deities, but it's a very simple way of addressing them. They are the Nutaruz, that is a more sophisticated description on them or of them. Sekhmet is a lioness, and Sekhmet is a fire. She's a healer. She heals through fire, and she really protects her cubs very much. She's the mother. She's the wife. What does a lioness do in real life? Husband sleeps all day, lazy. She goes after prey, brings the food. He eats, cubs eat, she eats last. She's the action. She's the action, she's the power. And the masculine in her life is Ptah. Together they made a triad with their son, Nefertum. He's the one with the brains. Ptah is the architect of sky and earth. He's the master brain, the thinker, the creator as an architect of the world. While he is wrapped in linen, but she's the one who goes, right? So together they make a family, or a positive, negative, wonderful togetherness with a son that came out of the primeval ocean on a lotus, the child Nefertum. We love Sekhmet so much. She's so fiery, and she can punish the enemies very much. She's very unpredictable. I once see her as boiling and I can't touch her. And sometimes she's so welcoming and I want to hug her. That's not me. I'm speaking about we girls all together. That's what we get from her, yeah? Mostly she's the kind, motherly one. And that also leads me to speak about the presence of Sekhmet, wherever she is, but of course best in her nest, where you mentioned before, and we don't want to make this super public, but there is a great energy there that we really love. And many, not everyone, some capture orbs in this place that we also capture in one or two more places only.
There's a great story about Sekhmet that she got so mad about something. I forget the details, but she was on such a killing spree that they had to fill a field with wine and get her drunk because there wouldn't have been any people left.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, Hathor wanted to revenge those who were not obeying Ra, the great father, the son Ra. He's the creator and he's the father. So people started to be naughty and neglecting and not obeying and not respecting. So she started punishing them, and she tasted the blood. And Hathor became bloodthirst. And the more she killed and ravaged, the more she loved the blood. And the baboon, the wise Jehuti, was afraid, and he consulted with Ra. Now the mankind will vanish. She's killing them all. So Jehuti came with a very good idea to tame her once more. So when Hathor had all this blood, she became Sekhmet, the bloodthirst, started to be Sekhmet. So Jehuti, she was sleeping. He came with lovely red wine, a lot of red wine next to her. woke up hungry, found the blood already next to her. She leaked and she healed and became back attained Hathor. So that's how the wine has saved mankind and tamed and Hathor became again the lovely, sweet, wonderful, loving Hathor. Look at how wise Jehuti is. You know,
That's
it's
why
wonderful.
I like to keep red wine around the house for Venice.
Huh? Okay.
I keep red wine around the house for Venice when she gets bloodthirsty.
We should have that recipe very much. You ladies, a glass of red wine is good for your skin too, huh? That's what they say.
Sohaila, we are going to have to get you to do an hour on just the gods and goddesses, the netters, because that's such a great story. I loved it.
All right. I'm very happy to be with you all, with my lovely friends and guests that you have, and with you too. It's a pleasure.
Ellen said that would be awesome too. So we all agree. We'll do that. We'll do that very soon. Thank you, Sohaila.
Bye, Ellen. Bye, V. Are we sure?
Yeah, I think we've done the hour, so I think that's great for now. Ellen says goodbye. Chance, you want to say goodbye? Thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, Sohaila. That was fantastic.
As always, Sohaila, we could go for hours and hours and hours. Sohaila was one of the things that made those trips so fun, because when you're in Egypt, it's just, there's no TV, there's nothing to do. You're just there all day long, and that's when she's at her best with stories. And if you don't have to constrain it to just an hour, I feel like we've talked about 1% of all the things we wanted to talk about, but it's a good reason to come back again. Thank you so much for your time, and the symposium so much better for having you here.
Thank you. Time flies with you. I was kind of nervous. What am I going to do? But you are always wonderful, Chance. You make me at my ease, and you're my old friend, and I love them all. I love all your guests. Thank you. And Egypt loves you all.
All right, Sohaila, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Bye, Chance. Bye, V. Bye.